My son's grades were so poor that I was called to school as a parent. The head teacher is my ex-girlfriend. Judging from these grades, it's inherited from you. Don't be polite. You have half the credit. After accidentally revealing my true feelings, the way she looked at me was different. I was stunned. I said it wrong. Do you believe me? I didn't expect that one day I would be called to school because my son did poorly in the exam. Even more unexpectedly, when I arrived at school full of energy and ready to teach that brat a lesson, what greeted me were a group of parents who were also poor students and an extremely beautiful ex-girlfriend. Is Jiang's parent here? If so, come and get his placement test paper and the class transcript. The woman speaking didn't look up, but this voice was all too familiar to me. It was exactly the same as when she whispered in my ear before. I had a bad feeling. I tiptoed over and took a peek. Then I was intimidated. Just by looking at that forehead and eyebrows, I could tell who this person was. Yuan, my ex-girlfriend who I broke up with 5 years ago. I just didn't expect that we would meet again under such circumstances. Moreover, I have a son who is a hindrance. The only thing to be glad about is that this son looks like me. I didn't dare to answer. I lowered the brim of my hat and walked over. After taking the few pieces of paper handed over by those fair and slender hands, I hid behind other parents, looking down at just one glance. I almost wanted to crawl under the table. The weights behind drive on those before. In the first grade of primary school. 67 points. How did this naughty boy get such a score? I could still get 70 points back then. After Yuan distributed the papers, she briefly explained the situation. Those invited this time are all parents of students within the bottom 10 in the exam. The placement test doesn't mean much. Moreover, it's only primary school. But I also hope that parents pay attention to their children's basic problems. After all, doing poorly in exams is a small matter. Continuously hitting a child's self-confidence is a big matter. I didn't listen to Yuan's later words. There were only 4 words in my mind. Bottom 10. My heart couldn't help but tremble. I picked up the transcript and silently counted my son's ranking. Well, very good. 3rd from the bottom. Zhang is courting death. Yuan's clear and cold voice gently talked about the problems of different children. I secretly looked up at her and couldn't help but curse. Amazing. Time. This butcher's knife really picks people to kill. Yuan's face was the same as before. Bright and magnificent. Captivating at a glance. Even her skin condition hadn't changed at all. The only thing that might have changed is that temperament. In the past, she was cold and indifferent, keeping people thousands of miles away. Now, she has a more approachable look. Thinking back to when she stood on the podium and gave speeches to all the teachers and students in the school, I would excitedly introduce to my classmates, "Look, my girlfriend is so beautiful." Who would have thought that a few years after breaking up, she would come to shine on the podium of my son? Yuan seemed to really be afraid of hitting the children's self-confidence and also wanted to give some comfort to the parents. She also specially set up some high-key pacesetters and hardworking pacesetters for a group of poor students. And my naughty son was honored to be on the list. Among the 5, he won 3 places. My fists were clenched. Just then, which one is Jiang's parent? My body stiffened, and I didn't dare to make a sound. Yuan asked again. The parents looked around. Who is it? Why doesn't the teacher answer when asked a question? I reluctantly stood up and deliberately cleared my throat. I am here. Yuan paused. Her gaze slowly swept over. Jiang's parent? I gritted my teeth. Yes. The corners of her lips, which were originally slightly curved and seemed approachable, immediately straightened. She exuded a coldness that I was familiar with. I didn't dare to speak. I was also embarrassed to look up. After a long time, she spoke again. Although Jiang's grades are not very ideal, he is still very outstanding in life. Can you share your educational methods? I forced out a stiff smile. Yuan must have recognized me. This question must be taking personal revenge. Just because we broke up, She is so mean to me. If she finds out that Zhang is her son, the consequences are too terrible. No, can't think about it and dare not think about it. As for her question, let him do everything within his power. Children are much smarter than parents think. I almost squeezed out the last few words through my teeth. Yuan's voice was still very cold. Well, much smarter. Me. I suspected that she was insinuating me. But I had no proof. Yuan picked up the transcript again. Her red lips parted slightly and reported all my son's grades in various subjects. When I heard the English score of 89 points, my eyes lit up. Not bad. English actually passed. I haven't passed before. Judging from Jiang's grades. It's inherited from you. Inherited from me? Third from the bottom? At least I was fifth from the bottom. For a moment, the rebelliousness in my heart was awakened. In a moment of heat, I spoke without thinking. Don't be polite. You have half the credit. A noisy office instantly became as quiet as a chicken. Dozens of eyes all looked at me in unison, with a frightened look of what are you talking about? I also realized what I had said. Oh my God. Before people even guessed anything, I exposed myself? With this kind of stupid operation, it seems that my son's intelligence is really inherited from me. I was on the verge of tears. No. Teacher. Listen to my explanation. I mean education. Genes and education are equally important. This explanation is very weak. I don't know if she believed it. She just took one more look at me, and then continued to talk about the children of other parents. Soon, after finishing, other parents left one after another. I hid myself among the crowd and wanted to slip away with them. I took a step forward. But I didn't move. Took another step. Still in the same place? I was terrified and looked back. Sure enough, Yuan hooked my backpack with 2 fingers. Trying to run? To be honest, back then I wished I could stick to her. If she said that, I would definitely go to KFC happily, and give her 50 yuan. But now I avoid her like the plague. I explained awkwardly, no. I'm not running. It's just a normal dismissal. I said the wrong thing just now. Don't misunderstand. Although I said that, my 2 legs stopped involuntarily. Okay. No misunderstanding. Then explain to me. We broke up 5 years ago. You have a 6-year-old child. What's going on? Yuan asked me in an exploring tone, as if discussing someone else's topic. But I understood her implied meaning. Because judging from my son's age, he was born exactly during my relationship with Yuan. So from a certain perspective. Fortunately, at a critical moment, a familiar voice sounded softly at the door. Daddy. You're here. I miss you so much, Daddy. I'm hungry as expected of my good son. He can save me from a difficult situation at a critical moment. Just for this. My son's little but is saved tonight. I put on an awkward yet polite smile. Children can't be hungry. I'll take him home for dinner first. Teacher. Don't see me off. Goodbye. Teacher. After saying that, I turned around and picked up my son and ran. I didn't dare to look back. Finally, when I reached the school gate in one breath, I was completely relieved. And just then, my good son in my arms suddenly spoke. Daddy. What's wrong with you? Does Teacher Song have something to do with us? She's about to catch up. Me. I secretly looked back. Sure enough, Yuan was following unhurriedly. She was already tall and slender. Plus, I was holding a child. Walking was not much slower than my running. Seeing that she was less than 20 meters away from me, I was so scared that I put my good son on my shoulder and rushed into the car. Start the car. Turn the steering wheel. Step on the gas. In just 3 seconds, all that was left for Yuan was the exhaust fumes. After returning home for a long time, my wildly beating heart finally calmed down. It's not that I'm cowardly, but Yuan is too serious. I still remember when we were in a relationship. Once when I was playing King of Glory, I teased my roommate and shouted, "Little sister. Big brother will take you." As a result, she caught me. "Sister? You call it so smoothly. It seems that you often take girls with you." I pulled her into my arms and called her sister 10 times with a red face before she barely calmed down. Just as I calmed down, my good son wouldn't let me go. He blinked his eyes and chased after me and asked, "Daddy, why are you afraid of Teacher Song?" Who is afraid of her? To prevent my good son from continuing to ask, I quickly diverted his attention. "You might as well explain to Daddy why you got 67 points. Who taught you?" "Little Jong," my good son said with certainty. "Daddy taught me." "Me. It's still inherited from Daddy." "Me," I said expressionlessly. "There is also half of Teacher Song's credit here." My good son sighed like a little adult. "Daddy, not shirking responsibility is the basic principle of being a person. You taught me." "Me. Very good." My son didn't inherit Yuan's intelligence, but he learned the ability to handle me perfectly. After finally coaxing my good son to sleep, I called my roommate with a mournful face. "Isn't it just being called a parent? As for being so dejected?" My roommate seemed to be eating something, and his speech was a bit unclear. I said in a numb tone, "I saw Yuan." With a poof sound on the other end of the phone, followed by my roommate's crazy coughing. Who? Yuan? The school beauty and top student Yuan from our school before? Where did you see her? Did you rekindle your old relationship?" I sneered. "Rekindle old relationship? She is now the head teacher of my son." "Roommate. What? Wasn't she recommended by the school all the way to undergraduate, master's and doctoral programs? How could such a talented person become a primary school teacher? Did she recognize you? Did she recognize your son?" I was speechless. She must have recognized me. But my son looks like me. How could she recognize him? I thought for a while and continued to add, "Moreover, except for his face, my son has also learned the nature of being a poor student to the fullest. There is really not a single bit similar to her." Finally, I said in a desperate tone, "I'm afraid I will be called a parent countless times." After hearing what I said, my roommate, who was originally worried, directly laughed. "Back then during childbirth. Who told you to deceive her that the child died but secretly kept this child in the end? You deserve it. A stupid child always has to meet the head teacher." "Oh no. Meet the head teacher who is also the mother." I hung up the phone expressionlessly. If it weren't for him, how could I have chased you on back then? The next day when my good son came home from school and while we were having dinner, I asked worriedly, "Son, did your teacher ask you anything today? Did she talk to you alone?" My good son looked at me blankly, tilted his head and thought for a long time before softly saying, "She didn't ask anything. She just asked us to fill out the student information form. The head teacher collects student information at the beginning of school. Very normal. Then son, when you have time, help Daddy secretly ask other teachers why Teacher Song is your head teacher. She doesn't seem very much like a primary school teacher. Not only does she not seem very much like one, clearly someone who could become a future scientific research talent. Coming here is really a waste of talent." I thought my good son would nod and agree. Unexpectedly, he suddenly raised his hand proudly. "Mommy, I know this question. Our Teacher Song came to Bi Chang for something and found this job temporarily. After finishing her business, she will leave." "Will leave?" I breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the difficult days will soon be over. But Yuan teaching, I thought of back then. In order to be with Yuan every day, I audaciously took advanced mathematics as an elective course with her. Mathematics is my weak point. Advanced mathematics is even more difficult than a heavenly book. And in order to make me understand thoroughly, she could patiently explain a test paper to me 3 times without getting tired. In the end of the semester, as a poor student, I actually got 95 points. You know, Except for that lucky time in the college entrance examination. I have never gotten such a high score in mathematics since I was a child. However, I escaped Yuan's devilish teaching, but my good son fell into it. Thinking about it more and more sadly, I silently gave my good son a chicken leg. Son, studying is hard. On the weekend, the classic famous scene reappeared at home chaos. Reason, doing homework. Seeing his dawdling appearance, I got angry. John, if you continue like this, I will give you Teacher Song's phone number and let her come and teach you in person. I can't really call her, but I can scare him. Obviously, my good son really falls for this. His little body trembled. After showing a pained expression that I haven't seen in many years, he began to bury himself in doing homework. As obedient as can be. I was speechless. Then I picked up the spatula and was about to cook. Just then, the doorbell rang. Son, open the door. My good son ran to open the door. 3 seconds later, I heard him shouting at the door. Daddy, you lied. I'm already doing my homework well. What's going on? I came out of the bedroom inexplicably. What did I lie about? Hurry up and do your homework well. When I saw the person coming, I was stunned. Home visit. 2 cold words. My good son and I trembled in fear at the same time. Yuan glanced at me inferently. Convenient? The spatula in my hand trembled twice. Inconvenient. But Yuan had no intention of leaving at all. Under her indifferent gaze, I felt my earlobes gradually getting hot. Very good. This bad habit of blushing when lying to Yuan still hasn't been corrected after all these years. Failing to stop her, she walked in as soon as she lifted her foot. I closed the door in frustration. Looking back, I saw her squat down and touch my good son's head. What are you doing at home? Daddy is tutoring me with my homework. Yuan's hand obviously paused. She looked up at me. You are tutoring him. Her tone was unhurried. But I felt her smile. I glared at her angrily. I don't understand advanced mathematics. Can't I still handle first-grade primary school mathematics? Are there only the 2 of you at home? Yuan's gaze swept around the living room. Of course I knew what she was asking. However, before I could speak, my son, who has a quick mouth, nodded like a sycophant. Yes. Just me and Daddy. Yuan nodded. Then let me, the teacher, help you check. I watched in a daze. Taking advantage of my son going into the room, I finally couldn't help being sarcastic. Teacher Song is really responsible. Doing home visits at night. It's my duty. Don't be polite. Me. What duty? Once again, I regretted being so quick-tongued. This question is careless. Pay attention next time. Hearing this familiar sentence, I subconsciously looked up at her. Yuan was smiling casually. Her fingers tapped on the test paper intermittently. It seemed that what was on the table was not a test paper but a precious scroll. My heart seemed to beat faster. Yuan, no matter how many years have passed, can still easily make my heart flutter. I was lost in thought for a moment. Just as I was about to break this atmosphere, my good son spoke first. Daddy, I got this question right just now. You tricked me. The cute and handsome little face was full of grievance. It seems so. My face instantly flushed red. I wished I could dig a hole with my toes. But Yuan suddenly curved her lips into a smile and glanced at my son. Get used to it. Having this negative example just now. I watched Yuan continue looking at the test paper. I unconsciously became nervous. As if at this moment, it was back to that midsummer again. Yuan was checking my advanced mathematics homework in an empty classroom. Her delicate eyebrows were sometimes relaxed and sometimes slightly furrowed on her elegant face. The continuous cicadas outside the window and the sweltering heat of summer seemed insignificant. Back then, I had only one thought. To be able to admire Yuan's beautiful face that was chased by countless people at any time. But every time she was particularly spoilsport. What are you looking at? See how many mistakes there are. I playfully covered the red crosses on the test paper with my hand. What else can I look at? Looking at Song Chen. At that time, although Yuan's mouth was tight, the smile in her eyes couldn't deceive anyone. Recite the formula. The cold voice rang in my ears. Those few advanced mathematics formulas that were deeply engraved in my heart came to my lips almost immediately. After I finished speaking, both Yuan and I were stunned. Immediately, the corners of her mouth lifted in an almost imperceptible arc. Daddy, what are you talking about? Do I have to recite it too? My good son looked confused. Yuan put down the test paper and praised in a cold voice. You recited it well. I'll spot check again next time. I used washing fruits as an excuse. In the kitchen, I wished I could slap myself to death. Sean and Zhang Bu, clearly you were the one who broke up. Now why are you still having a racing heart? Although I despised myself, after washing the fruits and passing by the study, I subconsciously took out the advanced mathematics book that hadn't fallen. When I realized what I had done, in this way, I walked out with the advanced mathematics book under my arm. Seeing Yuan leaning on the sofa in the living room, looking at me with light eyebrows and eyes. Where's Zhang? He went back to his room to sleep. I pushed the fruits towards her. Yuan. About the past grievances. Yuan interrupted calmly. Personal grievances. I won't bring them to work. I came this time to collect family information. I pursed my lips. Okay. You ask. As far as I know, Zhang is from a single-parent family, right? I subconsciously tightened the sofa cover. Sure enough. She knew. I wanted to lie and say no. But soon I became sober. Paper can't cover fire. Moreover, in this home, there is not a single item for women. Yes. Yuan paused. Since when? After hesitating for a moment, I couldn't help but ask in return. Teacher Song. I'm afraid this has nothing to do with studies. Right? Yuan's cold voice continued unhurriedly. Just answered truthfully. Just answered truthfully. I lowered my head and pondered for a long time before uttering a few words. Since birth. This time. She was silent for a long time. The name of the child's mother? This time it was my turn to be silent. The name of the child's biological mother. Yuan asked again. I suddenly laughed. Do you think this child is yours? There was a deathly silence in the living room. Teacher Song. Asking so many questions. Aren't you afraid your current boyfriend will be unhappy? But she looked up at me. Her voice was even colder than before. I've only had one relationship. I was stunned for a moment. But she didn't look at me anymore and got up and left. Sean. You take care of yourself. It wasn't until the door closed again that I slumped on the sofa in a trance. In fact, back then, I never thought of breaking up with Yuan. Yuan is 1 year older than me. When we were in love, it was the time when she graduated. She has always been excellent. So when Song's mother came to find me and asked me to break up with Yuan, I wasn't very surprised. But unexpectedly, there was a child between us. Song's mother thought this child would hold back Yuan's future. So she strongly demanded that she abort it. That was the first time Yuan resisted her mother for the child. Under the confrontation between the two sides, Song's mother took the lead in compromising. She found me in secret. She allowed Yuan to give birth to this child, but on the premise that I had to break up with her and take the child far away and never meet again. No one knows better than me how much Yuan likes this child. So I agreed. Therefore, on the day Yuan gave birth, I, in collaboration with Song's mother, deceived her, told her that she gave birth to a stillborn baby. Then I broke up immediately. In the end, just as Song's mother had said, Yuan completed her master's and doctoral studies consecutively and became successful in her career. Therefore, this also made me even more certain that my choice back then was not wrong. Yuan deserves someone better and much more excellent than me. After the home visit, I thought about looking for Yuan again, but I didn't know where to start to make this call. But unexpectedly, a week later, I received a call from her. Yuan's voice was a bit unsteady. Xiaoxuan fell and injured himself. The bleeding can't be stopped. He has been sent to the second hospital. Come downstairs. I'll pick you up. My head buzzed. I didn't even know how I got downstairs. After Yuan picked me up, she fastened my seat belt and comforted me. Don't worry. It's normal for children to fall and bump. But my face turned pale. But he has poor blood clotting function. This time Yuan didn't reply. But the speed of the car increased a lot. When we arrived at the hospital, a nurse was shouting at the operating room door for. But unfortunately, the hospital was short of blood plasma. Who can donate blood for a child? Taipei B. I clenched my fist. Just as I was about to speak, Yuan stood up. I am Taipei B. Doctor. She can't donate blood. I'll find someone else. The doctor frowned. Yuan was puzzled. But I had a hard time explaining. I still had this common sense that direct relatives couldn't donate blood. The doctor still wanted to say more. Fortunately, my roommate arrived. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Yuan spoke up next to me. Why can't I donate blood? My heart sank suddenly. Direct relatives can't donate blood. I looked up at her. Sure enough, she was already suspicious. I forced myself to be calm, looked at her hard and said word by word. Because I don't want to owe you. Sure enough, as soon as these words came out, her suspicion dissipated. After all, she knew my personality. It had always been like this. She was silent for a while before reluctantly saying, sorry. This time it was my negligence. I shook my head. It's my fault. The teachers in kindergarten were all clear about the situation. But after starting primary school, I forgot to tell the school about my son's physical problem. And this time, it's probably because the child. But I still can't help blaming myself. I should have reminded her again. Halfway through speaking, I couldn't help but choke up. I didn't know before. But when he was 3 years old, he was also injured. He almost. I turned my head aside, forced back the tears welling up in my eyes. I didn't even want to think about that past period. When he was little, he was very smart, learned everything quickly. But since that accident, I changed my mind. Forget about whether he studies well or not. As long as he grows up healthily. The doctor said that as long as he is careful not to get injured, there will be no problem. But now, suddenly, there was a pair of gentle palms on top of my head, gently patting. I looked up in a daze. Yuan, I'll be with you. At this moment, I couldn't help but hug her and cry. When I had cried enough, Yuan's shirt was already a mess. No. Sorry. I was a bit embarrassed. But Yuan naturally used a tissue to wipe my face. Half an hour later, the doctors finally pushed. Doctor, is my son okay? After taking off the mask, the doctor also looked relieved. This time the injury is relatively large. But fortunately, the blood transfusion was timely. There is currently no danger. He still needs to be observed in the hospital for a few days. I looked at his bandaged injury. Yuan stayed with me. You should go back earlier. I'm here. Yuan sighed for no reason. Didn't even move an inch on the bench. I persuaded her. It's okay. My roommate is also here. He is my son's godfather. He takes care of him more carefully than I do. Perhaps this sentence convinced Yuan. I breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, my roommate walked in with a needle hole on his arm pressed. Why are you still asking Yuan to leave at this time? It's fine if she didn't fulfill her responsibilities before. But now clearly. I covered my roommate's mouth. Be careful not to wake up your godson later. My roommate glared at me angrily. Only then did he give up angrily. But unexpectedly, just as we walked out of the ward door, we saw Yuan carrying two paper bags and walking over. I was stunned. She didn't leave. My roommate was even more surprised. Have you two made up? Dude. You still lied to me and said. At that moment, my eyelids were frantically singing, nervous. I was afraid that my roommate would say something outrageous. Yuan. Yes. I bought some toiletries and food. My roommate nodded in praise. And me. What do you mean by yes? I wanted to stay and take care of my son. But my roommate showed with his actions that he could do it. He urgently pushed me out and asked me to send you on downstairs. In the narrow elevator. There were only the two of us. Standing behind Yuan. I felt a bit uncomfortable. I could only look longingly at the jumping numbers on the elevator. But Yuan caught me looking when she turned her head. She pursed her lips slightly. Her expression was a bit cold. Are you so unwilling to be with me? No, no. I shook my head repeatedly. She had helped so much just now. If I said yes, it would be too ungrateful. She nodded and handed over her phone. Add me. I was confused. As his head teacher, I need to know his situation at all times. Yuan stood straight with her back. She didn't even look at me more. It was as if she wasn't the same person who comforted me softly at the door of the emergency room just now. After returning to the ward, my roommate immediately came over with a curious look on his face. How is it? Have you made up? It's not enough if you hide it from me. I twitched the corners of my mouth. I couldn't tell what it felt like in my heart. No, she is just doing her duty because she is the head teacher of our son. Really? My roommate pointed at the meal on the table with his chin. A simple head teacher still remembers someone's favorite crab casserole in college and went to buy it at that store at the school gate. And this towel and water cup. TSK. I looked at the things on the table and was stunned. The crab casserole is from that store at the school gate in college. Back then, I often went there with Yuan. I looked at the little dog on the towel and water cup. I suddenly remembered. Yuan. After we graduate and move out, let's buy everything small. Okay? No, Yuan said coldly. Theft. I gave her a look. I deliberately only bought one of the couple's water cups. In the end, when it was time to pay, Yuan awkwardly took out the other one. Check out both together. Back then, I was so happy. A girl like Yuan is hard to find. Besides, she has only been in one relationship with you, right? This proves that the boys who chased her later didn't succeed. Besides, considering the situation, there is still a child. My roommate pointed at the lying son. This is your trump card. After hearing this, I was even more frantic. After all, in Yuan's mind, this child is mine with someone else. Can't I go to her with a DNA test? After all, my roommate donated blood. Later, I sent him back too. Taking advantage of my son sleeping soundly, I sat on the bench downstairs and stared at the moon in a daze. Yuan and my son. This mother and son really easily affect my thoughts. Especially Yuan. What should I do? Thinking. Someone walked up to me. I was startled. Turning my head, I met Yuan's eyes. Why are you here? Just arrived. Yuan pulled me up expressionlessly. It's cold outside. Go to my car. No need. I wanted to pull my hand back, but was given a warning look by Yuan. If you get sick again, there will be no one to take care of you. I pouted and didn't answer, letting Yuan pull me to the parking lot and get into the passenger seat. The car was silent. The faint soap smell on her body suddenly calmed me down. So late. Why are you here? By coincidence. I nodded and didn't speak. After a long time, I spoke again. Yishuan is still upstairs. I'll go up first. But unexpectedly, just as I was about to, when she leaned over and closed the door for me, I saw that the coldness between her eyebrows was gone. There was also a faint smell of alcohol on her body. I frowned. Did you drive here after drinking? I drank after coming here. I continued to ask. She spoke first. Sean. You don't regret. Yuan leaned over most of her body in front of me. The distance was so close that our noses almost touched. My heart skipped a beat. I moved my wrist that was tightly held by her. Sean. Yuan's lips were tight. Her beautiful eyes were slightly red. I dodged and turned my head, but was forced back by the narrow space. Are you so avoiding me? In her suppressed voice. It's not hard to hear. Before I could explain, Yuan's red lips suddenly covered mine. My mind went blank. For a moment, I was stunned in place. After a long time, Yuan moved her lips away with red eyes. Why did you break up with me back then? Yuan's bright eyes suddenly dimmed. Is it because? She paused. That lost child. I opened my mouth but didn't know how to start. Just as I was about to speak, my phone rang again. Daddy? Why am I in the hospital? Where are you? I'm so scared. I quickly said softly. Daddy is downstairs. I'll be up soon. Don't be afraid. After hanging up the phone, he woke up. I need to go up and take a look. You can go back first. I thought for a while and added, remember to call a designated driver. Just after getting out of the car and taking a few steps, there was another sound of a door closing behind me. I looked back and saw Yuan trotting towards me. I'll go with you. When Yuan and I entered the ward together, my son was a bit nervous. Daddy. Teacher Song. My son's face was still a bit pale. I quickly stepped forward with heartache. It was still a bit hot. Teacher Song was worried about you and stayed with you all the time. Two small dimples appeared on Jiang's pale little face. Thank you, Teacher Song. Soon. The doctor confirmed that my son was fine. Just stay in the hospital for one more day for observation. I breathed a sigh of relief. After the doctor left, my son fell asleep again. Yuan and I started looking at each other, looking at the only remaining empty hospital bed. I hesitated for a long time before speaking. You can go back? Probably nothing will happen tonight. You can come again tomorrow. Yuan was sitting on a chair, casually flipping through a magazine beside her. Sleep on your own. Don't worry about me. I just wanted to object. Then I subconsciously remembered what she had just said. Are you so unable to be with me? I swallowed the words that followed and pointed at the accompanying hospital bed. It's getting late. If you don't mind, lie down and rest for a while. Yuan looked up at me. After a moment of silence, she put down the magazine in her hand and lay down. The moonlight shone on her thin figure. I subconsciously felt a bit of a trance, looking at her twice more under the guise of accompanying her. How could I not have my own ulterior motives? Time passed minute by minute. When I looked at my phone again in a daze, it was already 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. I got up and walked to my son's bed to tuck in the quilt for him. When I passed Yuan, I subconsciously put my coat on her body. In the next second, just as I was about to leave, I saw a pair of fair palms catch the corner of my clothes. Zhang, how about, let's squeeze together? It's too cold at night. She said this awkwardly. Immediately, a layer of blush climbed up her earlobes. I said it wrong. Pretend I didn't say it. She immediately tried to make up for it. But I had already taken off my shoes and socks skillfully, and lay down beside her sideways. At that moment, I felt my heart beating so loudly that I was flustered. But out of politeness, I still moved aside. Yuan didn't react. After a while, even breathing came from the pillow. But as she slept, just like in college, she unknowingly shrank into my arms again. By the moonlight, looking at Yuan's eyebrows and eyes, I unknowingly fell asleep too. The next morning, subconsciously, I wanted to stretch my leg. But somehow I thought of Yuan in my arms and immediately stopped. This stop immediately woke me up. As soon as I looked up, I was facing Yuan's burning gaze. Good morning. I awkwardly moved away. But she was looking at me intently. How did you sleep last night? I half-jokingly teased. Yuan still stared at me. Not bad. If it could be like this every night, it might be even better. I paused while rubbing my face. I was very surprised by her directness. My mind went blank and I stammered when I spoke. I'll go wash up first. I washed my face several times with cold water. The terrifying heat didn't subside but increased, slowly turning red. When I came out again, my roommate had already arrived. After Yuan greeted and nodded, she turned to me. I'll go back to school in the morning and come again in the afternoon. As soon as she left, my roommate couldn't hold back. How is it? How is it? Did you? Last night? I coughed lightly and touched my nose. Guiltily said, what can happen in the hospital? Don't talk nonsense. On the day Zhang was discharged from the hospital, Yuan accompanied us to send our son home. On the way, my roommate suddenly caused trouble again. Sean, Yuan has taken care of our son for so many days. Shouldn't we invite her to a meal? My hand on the steering wheel paused. Then I secretly glared at my roommate. Before I could say anything, that naughty thing of mine who had fully recovered and turned back into a brat excitedly kicked his legs. Let's go eat Western food. Yuan didn't speak, but her gaze also turned to me. Forced into a corner, I turned the steering wheel and drove in the opposite direction of going home. My roommate, in excitement, even called for a bottle of red wine. The point was that she didn't drink it herself but kept persuading me to drink. After the meal, basically all the red wine went into me and Song. When I was paying the bill, my feet were unsteady. My roommate pulled the naughty boy and shook her head in disgust. How did you get drunk like this? Yuan, why don't you send him back? Good son, you can stay at my place tonight. I was stunned. Why? Don't I deserve to stay at my roommate's place? After arriving downstairs, Yuan sent away the designated driver. There were only the two of us left in the car. The atmosphere gradually heated up. Looking at her eyebrows and eyes, I became more and more tempted. Unable to hold back, I hesitantly said, do you want to come up and sit for a while? Before I finished speaking, she directly opened the door and got out of the car. As soon as I entered the house, I was pulled by a force. When I reacted again, I was pressed against the wall by Yuan. Yuan lowered her head. Her nose was facing mine. The thin breath spread on my face. My cheeks also gradually warmed up. I thought something would happen. But unexpectedly. What about the promised explanation? I pursed my lips and looked into Yuan's gentle eyes. The sulkiness that had been pent up in my chest seemed to suddenly rise to my head. I actually struggled my hand free. I'll tell you. Yuan stared at me fixedly. I took a deep breath before I dared to tell what happened back then. Although we loved each other deeply. But your mother is right. Your future shouldn't be delayed because of me. So Yuan, I don't regret breaking up with you back then. With a stubborn look on my face. But my nose couldn't help but feel it whinge. But Yuan was stunned. You mean, my mother wanted us to break up? Why do you think I would apply for a primary school teacher position with a doctoral degree? I came here specifically to look for you. I just wanted a reason for our breakup back then. And this transfer document was also arranged by my mother. Now, not only Yuan was stunned, but I was also stunned. So I blurted out subconsciously. If so, then why did she threaten me to break up with you with the child back then? Child. Yuan's eyebrows immediately wrinkled. I immediately covered my mouth. But my scalp couldn't help but tingle. I didn't mean to drive a wedge between their mother and daughter. After all, breaking up with Yuan Bat then was definitely the most correct choice. A deathly silence spread between the two. Just as I wanted to say something, a crisp ringtone broke the silence. Yuan answered the phone. Song's mother's leisurely voice came through from the other end of the phone. Yuan. Although mother did many wrong things back then, mother also regrets it. Now mother only hopes that you can pursue your own happiness. So when will you bring my grandson back to see me? Yuan stared at me. After gritting her teeth and making a soft sound, she hung up. So, Zhang is our son? I nodded. Only by breaking up with you could I get your mother's consent to keep the child. I withdrew my gaze. I thought Yuan would be angry at my concealment. Unexpectedly. In the next second, her gentle kiss landed on my lips. Thank you, Sean. Before she could finish speaking, I immediately grabbed her hand. Immediately after, I picked her up horizontally and walked towards the bedroom. You're welcome. Wait for me to change places and explain it to you properly. After several explanations, Yuan gasped and called a stop. But after calling a stop, she hesitated to speak. Because she got a troublesome and poor student Sun Zhang. Yuan's beautiful expression was extremely contorted. Not knowing what to say. Her gaze was as gentle as water. It's also very good if our son is like you. Just know. I was secretly delighted. So we are both half responsible. I'm not wrong at all in saying this. Yuan completely lost her temper. She took me to the mall and carefully selected a cart full of gifts and went home. Meeting our son before was from the perspective of a head teacher. Now she is a novice mom. Yuan carefully presented toy racing cars, transformers, Lego bricks, etc. to her son. Zhang was panicked. It seemed that he was questioning why it was a toy racing car instead of an exercise book. I felt a bit uncomfortable. With red eyes, I explained to my son the fact that Yuan was his mother by his ear. My son was stunned. His eyes were wide open. My roommate looked at our family of 3 with a look of relief and was extremely satisfied. Finally, my son looked at Yuan and asked carefully, Teacher Song, didn't you come here for temporary business? Will you leave after finishing your business? I could tell that my son was worried about losing what he had just gained. This time, it was Yuan's turn to have red eyes. She looked at me, then at her son, and finally laughed. Mom came to find Dad. Unexpectedly. After finding Dad. I got you. Mom will always stay by your side and Dad's side and will never leave. I couldn't help but smile. As soon as my son heard Yuan say this, he immediately excitedly threw himself into Yuan's arms. Great. I have a mom now. And my head teacher is my mom. I'm so awesome. All right. Yuan and I looked at each other and smiled. Everything was understood without words. For the rest of our lives in the future. Is 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 in the future.